Okay, gentlemen, welcome today. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a little bit of a tangent in today's leadership discussion. I know that you guys aren't used to us taking any tangents or getting off subject or anything of that matter. People are now asking, we have a subject? But in any event, yesterday, I had the great zechut of being at the Levaya of Rabbi Label Dulitz A'H. Rabbi Dulitz was one of my teachers in MTA. Particularly, he was my English teacher. I was not zoche to have him for Torah studies. And I wanted to share a few words about him and about my relationship with him as kind of a segue to what we had discussed last week about hearing different speakers and learning from different teachers and seeing how different people can influence us. And one of the questions that I had asked last week is to think about a speaker or a teacher that impacted you. You know, we all have a couple of teachers that we remember from, like, I don't know, third grade or whatever, someone that did something differently, someone that was out of the box, maybe someone that showed us particular affection or care. And part of the leadership role is doing just that and making individuals feel good and making people remember our experiences and our interactions. Rabbi Dulitz was a Baal Tshuva. He was from New Orleans, or Nolans, as they call it there. And I had the great zechut of having him as a teacher in English, and I believe it was in 10th grade in MTA. Now, when I was in 10th grade in MTA, there was absolutely no thought or, even imagined reality in which I would have the title rabbi or anything like that. And Rabbi Dulitz was a very enigmatic man. First of all, he was of very large size, not fat, but he was just a big guy. And he was very intimidating because he had a way of speaking, and he was super brilliant. He knew all of Shas and all of Shakespeare by heart and would quote them like one after the other, so on and so forth. And he was just a very highly entertaining teacher. And you gentlemen will really appreciate this. Some of you know how I like to use big words and expanded vocabulary, mainly to make myself feel more intelligent than I actually am. But in fact, I really learned to appreciate vocabulary from Rabbi Dulitz, who made us memorize, dozens, if not hundreds and hundreds of words. And as a frustrated 15, 16-year-old, of course, I did not appreciate that. But I certainly appreciate it today. We know that, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, the value of communication and choosing the right words, and the more words, the more vocabulary a person has, the better one can express what they're thinking and what they're feeling to others. So in any event, Rav Dulitz we didn't have class, and it was like a marathon, because you never know what he was going to say, what he was going to do, what he was going to quote. But of course, we had little appreciation for this. Fast forward 2 years to my senior year in high school. I, at that point, was very into different pets, and we had discovered that down the street at YU there was a pet shop. The first prank was to release 60 feeder crickets in the assistant principal's office. Somehow that didn't get us in trouble. I don't understand why, but that's what happened. However, when we decided to take a caged mouse and send some poor freshman to put it on Rabbi Dulitz's desk in the middle of Shir, he did not take kindly to it, and the end result was we were suspended for a couple of days. In any event, after I left MTA, I was not that observant. I used to have like Et Chatai Ani Maskir Hayom. I know that that's like from 2-3 weeks ago for the Parsha, but the Parsha, it's like you can still quote it like 2-3. It's like the 3-second rule, like something. You guys know about the 3-second rule, right? I don't know if that's a thing. Rule? I don't know if 5 seconds even. And that gives us 5 weeks, But in any event, so the butler says to Paro. So in any event. So I had left MTA. We won't even go into the details of that, but suffice it to say I was not so enamored with Jewish observance. But I did want to go back and, visit my teacher, so on and so forth. So I went back. I was wearing my black leather jacket. I had long hair. I had like these black leather boots. And like, mamash, like half my teachers like couldn't even speak to me. It was pretty embarrassing. Like they were like, oh, this guy's like totally gone. So, and so I was really kind of surprised that people were not even willing to talk to me for a couple of minutes. And I went to Rabbi Dulitz's classroom, expecting him to, of course, yell at me or at least, blast me with some mussar rebuke. And that was not at all what happened. Rabbi Dulitz shook my hand warmly. He received me with a smile. I was like, I think the nicest he had ever been to me. Like, my entire... And he was just so nice and welcoming. And, this is a guy who got it. He understood what was going on. He understood, like, how to act when and what was appropriate. And I did not forget that. I did not forget, like, the one guy, who was really nice to me. And 6 years, when I went back to YU for smicha and saw Rabbi Dulitz at the door, the entrance to MTA, and he asked me, Alan, what are you doing here? And I told him, well, Rav Dulitz, believe it or not, I'm starting smicha today. And he almost had like a nervous breakdown on the spot, and then he smiled at me and gave me like this expression on his face, and he was very satisfied. He was very grateful about it. He was gratified, at the result. The story doesn't end there. A few years later, I was sitting with a good friend of mine, Stu Barinholtz, who lived next to me in Englewood. Now, he also was a student MTA. I didn't know him back then. And apparently his parents, Alema Shalom, they had some kind of relationship with Rabbi Dulitz. So he and I were like talking about Rabbi Dulitz. We were looking through like the yearbook. And we both were like, Rabbi Dulitz used to call our parents, like, in our class and like ask them, about us, so on and so on. I thought about it, I didn't have any other teachers in high school that called my parents, and I'll never forget, my father, Alav Shalom, would say, very, very stark memory, like Rabbi Dulitz called, and he'd say, and my father would retell the story. It's like he called, he said, are you happy with him? Are you happy? He could be doing so much better. I'm not happy with him, And Stu and I came to this realization, teachers don't need to call most of the time their students' parents. Like, why did he do it? Why he did it is because he actually really cared about each one of his Talmidim, and he wanted to speak to the parents, and he wanted to know what was going on. And so my friend and I came to this very, very uncomfortable realization that here we had this man who was an incredible Talmid Chacham, who was an incredible human being, who really cared about us, and we just thought he was psycho, and we had zero appreciation whatsoever for the fact that this man tried his best to make us more successful in Torah in general, so on and so forth. So we decided to do something about it. His son, Rav Elchanan, who obviously was there last night, lived in Bergenfield. He was the gabbai of Rabbi Neuberger Shul in Bergenfield. So I said, you know what? I'm going to give him a call, and I'm going to ask for his father's number, and we'll see. And so, believe it or not, and I still have it on my phone, we got Rabbi Dulitz's number, and we called him. And it was a very amusing phone call. He was like, he always used these, vocabulary. So I said, Rabbi Dulitz, I'm sorry I didn't call you earlier. And he was like, had you been more punctilious, you would have reached out earlier. That was a word that he always used, punctilious. Like anyone who went to MTA for like that, he taught at YU for 49 years. Anyone who went to MTA like had Rabbi Dulitz. He was like, he had like this, larger than life reputation. But in any event, I called him and I got to tell him, I want you to know, Rabbi Dulitz, this is where I'm at my life right now. And I just wanted to give you hakarat tov. I just wanted to tell you thank you. And I'm sorry that we didn't appreciate you back then. But in retrospect, I really appreciate, you and what you did for us. And thank you. And it was just amazing that I got to make that phone call, so on and so forth. Now, obviously, there are a lot of different lessons that we could derive from the whole story, so on and so forth. The first thing is to recognize that when we are younger and less mature, there are things in life that we don't appreciate. And it takes a certain degree of reflection and, hindsight to be able to appreciate things that we had in life. Obviously, from a Torah perspective, the ultimate goal is to try to have hindsight in the here and now and to appreciate who we have in the here and now. And you gentlemen, you're here for Shana Bad, so obviously you have a higher degree of appreciation. I'm sure that everybody in this room appreciates Rav Machlis. I'm sure you're going to be telling your grandchildren that you were able to sit in the same room and interact and learn Torah from Rav Machlis. And the same thing could be said about Rav Shammai, and we can go through every person that we have the fortune to interact with. But gentlemen, to appreciate it, to really appreciate it, to be in the moment, and not to just be like, yeah, whatever, I'm going to shir. The second thing is to recognize that, sometimes we're not at our best. Sometimes in life, often in life, we don't appreciate things. And is it too late? Once I've made that mistake, once I've missed out, is it too late, like in retrospect, not to appreciate things? I don't think so. Rabbi Dulitz certainly appreciated my phone call. I get phone calls sometimes, from a student who's like, yeah, I really appreciate so on and so forth. Everyone appreciates a little bit positive encouragement, positive feedback. So if you were in a situation where, you were lacking an akarat tov, right? There was an opportunity, there was someone that did kindness, it could have been a teacher, it could have been another student, it could have been, just somebody who worked at your old school, right? To just take the time to pick up the phone, to write them an email, so on and so forth, and just tell them, I appreciate what you did for me. It's never too late. It's never too late. There's plenty of teachers that you probably had that are now retired, that are sitting. They may or may not have too much going on. And they'd be thinking, what do I do with my life? I sat and I taught for like 50 years, whatever. Getting one email from a Talmud that says, thank you, I really appreciate it, like you changed my life, like makes that person's whole day bright up. Do any of you guys know my neighbor Lauren? You know Lauren? So Lauren came over a couple of, who knows, I don't even, like this before Corona, during Corona, whatever. And he mentioned that he had this teacher, and she made a tremendous impact on him. And so he wrote her a very long letter detailing like all the impact that she had, whatever. And he said that she wrote back to him and she was all by herself, and it like really made her day and like gave her like a new perspective on life. So gentlemen, do not underestimate the ability that you have to be makar tov. And it just a couple lines. You don't have to write a Megillah. You don't have to write a report. But just a couple of lines to people in our past that have done something positive for us, that have, whether we appreciate it or not at the time, we can certainly appreciate it now and look back. And thirdly, the importance to recognize that Hashem does give us opportunities like that in life, right? For example, I have been thinking about Rabbi Dulitz. I called him. I didn't realize I would have the opportunity to give further hakarat tov and be there for him when he was escorted, to his final resting place. Life is a circle. You gentlemen have been around, for a certain amount of time, but you will see that in life, friends, people that we meet, people that we know, so on and so forth, there is a whole cycle of hashgacha pratit, of divine providence, and of things that happen. There's no person that doesn't have his place. There's no item that doesn't have its importance. So it's so fascinating to recognize how this cycle of life, how so many of us will come back together. So some of you guys, you may not see each other for 20 years, right? Like Ethan's going to go back to Montreal. The other Ethan's going to go back to California. Oy vey Zmir. Aiden's, hopefully going to go to YU. We'll see what happens, But at the end, Noam will be there also. Amar will go back to the backwards country, Florida. And Marcus, you're staying here, and Ori's staying here as well. Well, I was saying you're both Marcuses. I mean, that was a double Marcus there. But at the end of the day, gentlemen, you don't know what's going to be going on 10, 20 years from now, right? There's a famous story from Rav Shlomo Carlebach. I usually save this for weddings and whatnot, but it happened that Rav Shlomo was on an airplane, and there was an airplane stewardess who didn't look particularly Jewish, right? She was like blonde, blue eyes, so on and so forth. And he saw her at a certain point, she took out her siddur and she started saying bracha and so on and so forth. And so she recognizes Rav Shlomo Carlebach, so she came and she started speaking to him, and he said, maybe I can do something to help you. She said, Rav Shlomo, yeah, you could really help me. Here's the story. I'm a Gioretz. I converted to Judaism, and I'm engaged to this wonderful fellow, and he's a Baal Tshuva, and his parents, they're Holocaust survivors, but although they're not observant, they refuse to accept that he's going to marry me because I'm a Gioret. They refuse to accept. They said, we may not be observant, but if you marry a non-Jewish woman, we're not in. We're not going to be involved. So even though I've converted, they don't accept it, and they're giving us a lot of tzaras. So Rav Shlomo said, I would be more than happy to call them. I'd be more than happy to try to see what I can do. So he takes their number, he takes the girl's number, the girl's parents, he calls them. It's a very, very difficult conversation. He sees, I can't get anywhere with these people. They're just adamant. So he decides, I'm going to call the Kala's family. He calls the Kala's family. He calls the parents. He's talking to them. Why did your daughter convert? This, that, and the other thing. And finally, the father says, I'm going to tell you something that we've not told to anybody. I haven't told anybody this. The truth of the matter is, my wife and I are actually both Jewish. We're not Christians. After the Holocaust, we both wanted nothing to do with Judaism. We converted to Catholicism. We pretend to be Catholics. We don't really practice anything. But we never wanted our daughter to go through what we went through, and therefore we never wanted her to know that she was Jewish. And Rav Shlomo said, well, hold on, don't you understand? The whole problem with the shidduch is that the other parents refuse to accept that she converted, that she's Jewish, but now you're telling me she's really Jewish. There's not a problem here. So he calls back the other couple. He said, wow, that's unbelievable. Okay, let's get together, everybody, for the Chaim, and everyone will meet, so on and so forth. They arrange the meeting. The two fathers, when they see each other, look at each other. It says, Chaim, Beryl, oh my goodness. And they fall on each other's arms, weeping. What's the story? I hadn't seen each other in many, many years. Before the war, they were chavrutas. Before the war, they learned the same yeshiva, and they were chavrutas, and they were the best of friends. But it gets crazy. One of them looks to the other as they're sitting, they say, remember when we were learning yeshiva, and we were joking with one another, and I said to you, if I have a son and you have a daughter, we have to make sure that they have a shidduch. Looks like Hashem remembered our promise and made sure it would come together. I just say this in way of passing, gentlemen. We don't know how the circle, the connections will be, but Hashem has his plan of how we all interact with one another and how we all come together. How ironic that here, right, my community rabbi, Rabbi Golden, I have his son, his grandson, Isaac Golden, in my class. The other day we were chatting on WhatsApp. I said to Rabbi Golden, who would have imagined, 30 years ago, when I was a wild and crazy teenager and you were very kind in dealing with me, that I would be your grandson's teacher. So this is the way life goes. It's a fascinating journey. But Sof Davar, I thought it was very important. I felt impelled to speak about Rabbi Dulitz, Zichron Livracha. He was a great individual. He was a Talmid of the Rab. He was a person that was dedicated to his students. I'm glad that Hashem privileged me to be able to learn with him and also to be able to come to the appreciation of who he was, and of course to be able to be finally to give the Hakarat Tov that he deserved and to accompany him on his final journey. And I bless all of you that you should be able to come to the realizations and appreciate your teachers, your friends, your parents, your family members, and not have to wait until later on to have that akarta tov and that appreciation. A very vital facet of both being a leader and being a Jew. So I'm going to stop there. If anyone has any questions.